What is happening, guys? Max here. We're going to do a fly tie here, and we're going to go over one of my sculpins that I like to fish here in West Michigan, and this one's called Field's Dirty Sculpin. So one thing that I want to touch on before we dive into this, and we're going to cover this in our fly here, is when we're swinging flies here in West Michigan, we tend to have a problem with hooks sagging down below the fly. So I have an example here to kind of show, and this is a problem that we face quite often here in Michigan, is our hook is hanging below our fly. And one thing that I always like to do with my swing flies is putting a tube in the back of the tail. So if we imagine the tail is being pushed by current, you can notice that the hook is always riding true in the back of the fly versus this example here that has no tube in it. The current's pushing on the tail and the hook is sagging down below. So let's dive into the fly here. So we're going to start out by putting the tube in our tail here. And I just have a cut hook here. It can literally be anything, but it's just a cut hook. And we're going to start off with HMH tubing. This is the small clear version, but another one that I like to fish is the orange tube in the tail. And the orange tube will somewhat create a hot spot in the back of our tail when our clear one will just be clear. So I always like to start by cutting a very small section of this tubing off of the strand, and we are just going to thread that tube onto our cut hook shank, and we are just going to put that in our vise. Now we're going to take some Solar Res. This is the thin version, and we are just going to put a small dab of that right on top of the tube. And next we're just going to take a rabbit strip here. We're tying this one in olive today. We can do it in tan, we can do it in black, we can do it in a multitude of different colors, but we're starting with olive today. The two that I always like to fish for this are going to be our olive variant or our Sculpin olive for rabbit strips. So we're going to start off by just splicing our rabbit strip very far forward on the hide. And I always like to just kind of take my scissors or a bobbin and just splice that tail so we can show the hide on it. And we are just going to lay that right on top of our tube, right in the middle of that splice. I'm going to pinch it with my fingers, and I'm going to hit it with my UV light. That will lock our rabbit strip on top of our tube. So wet my fingers so I can part the hide and the fibers a little bit more. And all I'm going to do is do 1, 2, 3, 4 wraps, securing the hide to the tube. I'll release a little tension in my fingers here to put the tube up on top. And I'm just going to cover that tube in a light coating of Solar Res and hit it with my light. We'll trim our thread off, pull it out of the vise, and slide everything off. So now our tube is secured into the tail. And again, this is going to eliminate the problem of hooks sagging down below our flies. So to start everything off, we're using the brand new MFC shanks here, and this one is in a 25 millimeter. We'll put that in our vise, and we're going to lay a thread base down over the shank. So next we're going to attach our weighting system into here. These are just red brass eyes. We can use small lead eyes, we can use bead chain, we can use brass eyes. Dealer's choice on what you guys want to use for a weighting system, but I always like to see some sort of weight system in this fly. We're going to tie our eyes into the shank, and I'm going to give it about 1 eye gap back from the front. And we're just going to secure those with figure 8 wraps and wrapping below the eyes to secure everything. So next we're just going to take about a 8, 9, 10 inch strand of 40-pound braid. This happens to be Power Pro. Fireline does just as well. We're going to fold this in half. And next we're going to take a Fulling Mill FM 6070 Octopus Hook. I like fishing a little bit bigger hooks, and this is going to be a number 2. And we're just going to loop that braid onto our hook. We're going to take the end of the braid and go through the tube that we just put into our tail. And we are going to tie our braid on top of our hook shank. Now I'm just loosely wrapping this on here so I can pull my braid loop back and forth so I can get the length that I'm looking for. And I'm looking for an overall length somewhere around 3 to 4 inches for this fly. So once I get the length find, I'm going to get my rabbit strip figured out on my distance. And I always like to leave a very small gap from where my tube is to where my hook eye is. And I'm just going to split that fiber, getting a clean hide exposed. And I'm going to tie that right into my hook shank. 1 or 2 wraps in front, come back over just to secure that in there. Next, we're going to add our flash into here. So this is dealer's choice on what color flash blend you want to use. On this particular fly, I'm using a speckled gold Flashabou, a speckled copper Flashabou, and red Flashabou. And I'm just going to take about, 8 to a dozen strands or so of flash. I'm going to find about the midway point on it. And I'm going to tie that in on top. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to take my red Flashabou. And in this one, I'm going to use maybe about 6, 8, 10 strands or so. Again, find about the midway point, tie it right on top. 1, 2, 3, 4. And last, I'm going to take my speckled gold Flashabou, and again, somewhere between 8 and a dozen strands, somewhere in there. Find the midway point, lay it on top. We're going to tie that in. And then we're going to take all this mess of Flashabou. We're going to fold it over itself and secure it down. Next, we're going to trim our Flashabou. So we're going to find all of our ends. We're going to go roughly about the length of our rabbit strip here. And I'm never going a direct cut into it. I'm going to slightly taper it, going back and forth, cutting a few strands at a time. Secure that down. Now next I'm going to take my tag end of rabbit strip and I'm going to do 1 palm ring wrap and 2 palm ring wraps. Tie it down and trim our tag end off. And we kind of have a little bit of a mess with our rabbit here, and what I always like to do is tie down that hide, and I'm going to wrap slightly back over top of my rabbit, orientating everything towards the rear of the fly. And I'm just going to go ahead and kind of pick this fiber out. We don't want any fibers matted down or tied down into it. Now these little Velcro finger strips here from Hairline are killer things to have on your bench here. Highly recommend to have these things. So I've got my Flashabou tied in, I've got my tail tied in. And now we are going to take a Mallard Flank feather. This one happens to be a wood duck color. And I'm looking for a very loose feather. I'm not looking for a very stiff feather here. I'm just looking for a kind of loose feather with a very thin stem on it. And I'm just going to peel some of these fuzzies off of the bottom of it here. We're going to tie this in tip first. We're just going to pull our fibers down, exposing the tip of the feather. Tie it in by the tip. We're going to give about 2 to 3 wraps of our mallard flank here. And this particular feather is going to give me about 2. Tie it in, trim our tag. Now just like our rabbit strip, I'm just going to fold these fibers back and I'm going to slightly wrap back over the fiber, again just to orientate these fibers rearward. Give it a few more wraps here. Perfect. So the next step that we're going to do here, we have a hen saddle here. This happens to be in a barred olive. And we're going to go through the hide here of our hen saddle, and I'm going to pick out 2 even feathers, kind of about in the midway point of our hide here. And I'm looking for the most even, symmetrical feathers that I can find here. I'm going to pull 2 out. Now when we're looking at these feathers, there is going to be a curvature to them, and I want these feathers curving outward on this fly. Just like on sculpins or gobies, they have real large pec fins, and I want to show these fish that this fly has pec fins to it. So we're going to take 1 feather, and I always like to kind of strip a portion of this feather off of here, exposing the stem. And we're going to take our feather and we're going to roughly measure about the length of our rabbit strip, just slightly shorter than our mallard flank fibers. I'm going to tie it in on my side here first. And we're going right down the side of our fly here. And I can use the stem and the tip of the feather to kind of pull and orientate that feather to get right on the side of our fly. Trim 1. Line it up. Now one way that I like to secure these pec fins in here without having to use some sort of glue or resin is we're going to take the stem and the tag end of our feather and we're just going to fold it back over itself and tie it down. And I find that this is a great way to secure these pec fins into this fly. So like everybody can see here, you see we have 2 pec fins going out into the side of this fly. And that looks good to me here. Now one thing that I like to do to these sculpins as well, and I don't necessarily know if this is very crucial to the fly, but I really like doing this, is we're going to take some barred speckled crazy legs in red. And we're going to take 2 rubber legs here. I'm going to flip my fly upside down. I'm going to fold these over my thread in half. And I'm going to tie these 4 legs just right on the bottom of our fly here. And when we trim our rubber legs, we're going to go about the length of our palmered rabbit or just about the length of our mallard flank feather. So now we have our tail done. We have our pec fins put in, kind of these little cool rubbery leg looking things on here. And now we're going to do the head to our sculpin here. So our sculpins, our gobies, bait fish like this, they have a very big head on the front. And this is what's going to push water and allow our rabbit strip and our Flashabou to bounce, wiggle, dance, do all the fun stuff. I always like doing 2 tones to my sculpins. There's no such thing as one solid color in nature, and everything kind of has a few different colorations to it. So for the head, we're going to use MFC's Dirty Bird dubbing. And in our specific colors here, I've got the orange Craw and the dirty Martini olive here. We're going to have our thread behind the eyes that we've locked in here. And I'm going to start out with my Craw orange Dirty Bird dub. Now this is going to be messy here. So be prepared to have a ton of dubbing flying around everywhere here. So I've got a small pinch of dubbing here. This is maybe about half the diameter of a pencil or so. And I'm going to grab both ends of my dubbing and I'm going to rip this in half. Now I'm just going to tease this dubbing, trying to get all the tips of the dubbing lined up somewhat close. Just kind of the best of your ability. I'm going to pull this in half, splitting the amount of dubbing in my fingers. And I'm going to take my 2 clumps and I'm going to go one on top, one on bottom, one loose wrap, pull tight, a loose wrap, pull tight. And I'm just going to pull all these fibers back. And again, if you don't have these little finger dubbing brushes here that we have in the shop, highly recommend to help pick these materials out. And I'm just going to kind of brush these materials out a slight bit. Now we're going to bring our thread in front of our fly, or in front of our eyes. And now we're going to go to our dirty Martini olive color. Love this color for sculpins. Just like before, we're going to take a pinch of dubbing. This one's going to be a little bit more than what we did in our previous one, kind of about the thickness of a pencil here. We're going to grab the ends, and we're going to rip this stuff in half. Teasing the tips, trying to get everything roughly about the same length. We're going to split this in half. We're going to go 1 pinch on top, 1 pinch on bottom. Loose wrap, tight wrap, loose wrap, tight wrap. And I'm just going to kind of push this dubbing around the fly so I can expose the eye of the shank here. Advancing our thread forward in front of our dubbing. Few wraps just to secure this. And I'm not wrapping back on the dubbing here. I'm just building a very small thread dam in front of it. I'm going to go ahead and comb all this stuff out so we have no materials matted down. One thing I like to do before I whip finish this fly is I'll kind of look at what our dubbing is. A lot of times it'll kind of cover up those pec fins. And again, I want to show those fish those pec fins. So I'm just going to kind of pick off some of these longer fibers out of our dirty bird here, just to expose these pec fins. That looks good to me. A few more wraps just to secure. And then we are going to go ahead and whip finish. And we are good. Make sure our Flashabou is all lined up. Perfect. And that right there is my dirty sculpin, or called Field's Dirty Sculpin. Again, I really love putting those tubes in that tail. When the current pushes on this rabbit strip, that hook is always going to be orientated towards the rear of the fly, and when fish come up and grab the back, they are not going to miss that hook right there. Swing on through the shop. Come check out all the new materials we have to offer, and we have all the materials to help tie Field's Dirty Sculpin for you guys. Thanks a lot, guys.